Okay. Full screen now, Dr. Pali. All right. I'd like to welcome y'all to the mental health awareness stream. I try to do these every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time because I feel very passionate about it, and I started doing this back in February. And I hope y'all can hear everything okay. The week, let's see, I started doing these February on Tuesdays, and that Thursday is when my stepdaughter's boyfriend took his own life, and I'm pushing through, and this is so important to me. If y'all were here for the Mental Health Awareness Week last week, you heard a little bit about my reasons why I'm doing this. To sum it up, the statistics are 1 in every 5 Americans suffer with some type of mental health issue, and I'm 1 in 5. And I learned the importance of talking about it and not doing this by myself because I can't. It was just making the problem worse. So I'm doing these to offer a safe and open platform to people that suffer or struggle with mental health issues or are affected by it by the outside, like family members. And I asked Dr. Polly here if she would be okay for an interview. My chair is sinking down. If she would be okay if I did an interview with her, and I'm going to ask her the same questions that I asked the other interviewees last week as well. Just, they're good questions. They're simple and very open-ended. And I want to pause here and give her an opportunity to introduce herself and tell us what it is that she does.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Mental health is obviously a passion of mine. I'm sorry about the recent losses. That's really hard. I don't think there's ever a way to overcome those or grieve them. I think people grieve sudden losses for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so in terms of mental health, it's my passion. It's what I went on and got my PhD in. And I also have my master's in both marriage family therapy and school counseling. And I have been passionate about mental health and whatever capacity that I could serve in. And currently I do crisis counseling and suicide assessments. I have worked on mobile crisis teams, and pretty much I meet people when they pretty much have tried everything and they've exhausted their resources and they don't know what else to do. And so I help them navigate the mental health system here in California. I'm in Northern California, and I help them find ways to be safe. And if they're unable to be safe, then I write the the agreement to hospitalize a client if they are unable to stay safe, or if they don't have a safe place. Even if we find them a safe place to go, if they don't feel like they can be safe, then we work out an agreement. And so I have just really loved mental health. It's a topic that I think is important no matter what race you are, what socioeconomic class you come from, how much education you have, how much education you don't have. It doesn't matter. It affects everybody, and there is no particular group that it affects, or it doesn't affect, and it affects. I mean, it's pretty equal across the board. There are some groups, cultural groups, that access mental health very infrequently because they try to manage those type of needs within their own community. But as mental health awareness gets more and more prevalent, and there's less stigma around mental health access, more and more people are seeking it. And so that's pretty much a little bit about me. I just love mental health. And if there's any way I could assist people, whoever's struggling, I feel like I've done something worthwhile in the world. And so that's what gets me up in the morning every day. I'm going to also plug in my little tablet here because it's about to die. And so just give me a minute. I thought it was charged, but I did use it earlier today. So maybe I just didn't pay close enough attention.
No problem.
Charged. Yeah, I don't want it to die. Um, it's such an important topic that I'm so glad we have this platform to discuss such needs. So, yeah. Okay, we're good. I plugged myself in here.
And I actually come across you on See-Through Gaming's platform for his community talks that he was doing for a while. And he actually recommended you to me for the mental health work. So apparently it's not gone unnoticed, your passion for it. So that's great.
Yeah, I know See-Through's mom, and then she actually asked me if this was something I would be willing to do, even if I come on just once. And I fell in love with it. I was like, this is a great platform. I do understand that there are a lot of people who are gamers, and they tend maybe not to reach out for as much support, or they maybe reach out with one another. And so initially, when I started thinking about help, like being a co-host on See-Through's page or like See-Through Live, I started to recognize how valuable it is for all kinds of age groups, and that maybe it's also a platform to break down stigma and help people recognize what maybe mental health can look like and how they can be treated in terms of a relationship with somebody who has a mental health background, because a lot of times people feel like there's a power dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, people are hiring someone, or someone, I practice a little bit different. If someone's going to ask me to come help and talk, I'm not looking at the monetary value. I'm just really eager to come in and try to give people knowledge so that they can access what they need. And so access is a big thing for me, in terms of spreading access out around the world, not just where I live, but everywhere. So when I was asked to do that, I was like, yeah, oh my gosh. And I have not missed um, like a show yet or going live yet. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's good. I like hearing that because I know myself, I was silent for about 10 years about, it was an internal battle and a tug of war. And I was scared to talk about it because I really thought that if I would tell somebody about it, that I would be labeled crazy and I would be put into an insane asylum. That's how chaotic it was inside. And I started talking to my friend about it, and she was like in tears, like, I identify with so much of what you just said. Oh my gosh. And I'm just like, oh, so it's not just me. Oh my gosh. Talked to another friend. She identified with multiple things as well. And it was very normal. And it brought me back down. I still had tug of wars and stuff, but I realized the importance of it. And like I said, I started doing these back in February, and it's got people reaching out to me because I'm talking about it. They know, they hear my story and they're like sending me messages. I need to tell you my story. Maybe it'll help you, but it'll definitely help me being heard. Or they make statements like that. And a lot of people are just looking for coping mechanisms, or the way I word it, people are hurting and they're looking for a way out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's important for people like you to come on these. I've had one other last week, one other mental health professional come on. He was trained. His name was Stephen Littleton. I know him personally, and then yourself, because I don't know, they get it from both sides, the professional, the skilled and trained aspect, as well as others that are suffering from it. So, could you tell us 5 things about yourself?
Okay. Anything? Um,
Anything.
okay. Let's see. I have two German Shepherds that I love to death. I really love dogs. I grew up with them. Um, I love nature. So anything with green hills, it's just absolutely soothing for me. Um, I love to cook and I love like spa treatments, and I tend to just have my own, like I give myself my own spa treatments. And then I also make soap. So I'm rarely deficient in the hobby area.
Oh,
I,
wow.
there's a lot that I like to do. And so technically I love traveling, but when I started having taking care of dogs, it's really like I think twice before I travel, just because I don't like to leave them,
Yeah,
even though they're left with good people. It's I always worry about them. That's pretty much me.
that's pretty cool. So I just learned something about you. That's fun. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was my first, really my first question. The next one, we're going to get right into it.
Okay.
So, my first official mental health question is, tell us your opinion and your thoughts on what you think mental health is.
So I think mental health is a really big, broad range of things. I think that we can look at the neurochemical aspect, and people can neurochemically have an imbalance that requires, if it's not treated by like basically medications or in a neurochemical manner, it hopefully can be treated through talk therapy or coping mechanisms, but not always. So there's this range, the spectrum where there are neurochemical balances that are really intense and also very mild. And both can be treated by medication depending on what is needed for that person. And then there are slight variations of mental health needs throughout our life. So, or our lives as we go through different things developmentally, I see mental health needs pretty common amongst a lot of males going through high school puberty. Um, it comes a lot, at least in terms of when I mainly served in private practice. Um, I saw a lot of high school males struggling with puberty issues, and I tended to get a lot of clients in that age group, because one would open up and then maybe they would tell their family and their friends and then their friends, and I would get a lot of clients that way. um, and then I often work with clients that maybe were feeling depressed, but we looked at coping mechanisms, we looked at things like nutrition, um, going to bed at a reasonable hour, managing stress. And then, even as we move through life, we might have some losses. Um, it can happen really young. There's people who lose loved ones in high school, even younger. And then, even as we age, we can lose parents, loved ones, family members, boyfriends, girlfriends. And those can be pivotal times that um, someone might just need some support, and talking isn't enough. And so I think mental health is just so broad and so vast. And then I could have some just topics around not necessarily like depression and anxiety, but adjustment type of disorders where maybe somebody's entering a relationship, they don't know how to navigate the relationship, or they're having struggles in their dating life and they want to stay in this relationship, but they're not necessarily sure how to maintain that because a lot of their moral values or their financial or day-to-day values are being challenged by a significant other. And so I look at those needs very different than someone, let's say, who's struggling with schizophrenia, severe types of hallucinations, both auditory and visual. The needs are completely different, but I think that the needs are all important. So it doesn't matter if the stress is relationship, dating, if someone's struggling in high school, if someone just had a major loss or death. I believe that they're all significant struggles. And I always hate when someone says, well, it could be worse, or I have nothing to complain about, because it it is significant for that person in their life based on what they know and what tools they have to navigate it. And so we all need somebody who could help us process and navigate those difficult times. And if people aren't opening up and they're not sharing, or they feel like their situation is silly, then nobody's getting the help that they need. And and then all on the also in that spectrum is also cutting and um, suicidal needs. So I think the spectrum is so large, but mental health is also significant if it's basically if you are being impacted in your daily functioning, and it's getting harder and harder to function, whether at work or school or managing kids or your direct relationships with others. I think that's pretty much mental health in a nutshell. It's so big and broad, but it is a definite imbalance or coping imbalance between the brain and the body and one's environment, I think.
Ooh, that was a strong definition, especially right there at the end. Yes, I'm like, yes, that is the perfect way to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, my next question is, do you think that mental health is important, and why do you answer that way?
Um, I do think it's very important because and the reason I answer it that way is because all of us need somebody at some point in our lives. I've not met one person who basically says, oh no, I have life down pat. I don't need anybody. I don't get depressed. I don't have anxiety. I don't grieve. I haven't come across a person like that, no matter how big, bad, or strong they are. I think at some point in life that most people struggle with something. How long they struggle or how they struggle varies. And most people probably, um, there are many people, not most people, but many people who don't even recognize that they might need to talk with somebody. And so I think it's very important because it impacts marriages, relationships, child parenting, like child rearing, um, work, finances, so many things. And some people are struggling maybe to get out of bed, whereas another person may be struggling with their interpersonal relationships at work or in their family life. So I think mental health is in everything that we do. And it's our well being and our ability to maintain that well being despite what is happening in our lives. And so I think it's absolutely important. I think I answered all of that
Yes,
question.
and
Yeah,
then some.
yeah.
I'm loving this. I love your answers. Um, so we're talking about mental health, and we've mentioned the word stigma in this conversation already, and struggles, and that leads up to my next question is, do you, well, kind of, Do you think that mental health or mental illness, specifically mental illness, is common?
I do think it's common. I didn't look up current stats, but I do believe that in the younger generations, we have staggering numbers, like they're just growing um, a lot in terms of depression, anxiety. The numbers are like triple, I believe, than maybe someone who is like my parents' generation or generations after. But I also think that community looks different. Like people are moving more often. They're not basically staying in just one community and going to maybe the same churches or the same, they don't have the same neighbors all the time. And then we have social media, and we have access to information so much faster, and there's not this lag of processing maybe what he said, she said, but it's like instant. You can get a text message, you can get a message on Messenger, and um, there I think there's even a generation that's missing out on how to even process information or what to do to manage it. So I think that the mental health needs are growing um, a lot at alarming rates. And just recently, I think I read an article today that was discussing how suicide is increasing after the COVID, well, during COVID-19. And so, yeah, I think it's really significant. And, as I also think that, like, as our world is so sensory inundated, things are really fast and we're expected to process like computers and like there's so much disconnection that people can really feel lost in that, and some people thrive on that. And so if people aren't taking enough time to manage self-care, or what does that even look like, because they're not taught about it in their families or their friendships, then their brain is always on, and it's so important to be able to rest and turn off our brain. So it's I think everybody needs somebody at some point. So.
Strong, man. This is strong. Ugh, this needs to be said. And it is a very sensitive subject, for people that have experienced recent losses and whatnot. And
Mm-hmm.
but it does need to be talked about. So why do you think that there is such a stigma about mental health and mental illness?
I think that there's such a stigma about it because when we think of the history of mental health, like during the moral movement or moral revolution movement, or moral treatment, that's the word I was looking for. People were shackled and they were hospitalized and they were forgotten, or they were just deemed as not useful, or there was no other significance to a human being if they had a mental illness, which we know is not true today. And so I think that too many people attribute a mental health need as crazy, these ugly labels like crazy, she's psycho, he's psycho. And it's sad because I would love for us to move away from that type of labeling, right? And then there's also mistrust. There are community groups, rightfully so, who mistrust medical professionals and even mental health providers. And I can understand that just by the history of how certain groups maybe have been treated. And then there's also just this mistrust of what's going to happen if I ask for help. Are they automatically going to throw me away into like a hospital? And that's not the case. A good therapist a well-trained therapist would work with you and talk with you and look at what are the resources available to that person. I can't speak for all therapists and how they practice, but I think we have done a really good job in many of the states moving away from that kind of treatment that, oh, you can't take care of yourself. Oh, you have a thought of suicide. It's completely normal to have passive thoughts of suicide. It's just when you want to act on those. Um, it doesn't mean everybody gets hospitalized and they never get out. That's not true. And so I think there's just a lot of stigma because just like a physical ailment, if our heart isn't working right or our lungs aren't working right or something's going on with our appendix, we get treated for it and it seems to be so much more acceptable versus, oh, there could be like hormonal imbalances which are triggering other neurochemical imbalances, and right now I just need something, maybe even for 3 months, to put my body all back in balance. Or maybe I just need to be able to talk about the stressors that I've experienced or we've experienced, right, on a daily basis or within our life that are triggering a past memory of some kind of trauma. And, people may not expect it and then it pops up.
Yep.
It's just sad that we think that that shouldn't be a part of us because it's a part of us. We should have every ability to process how we're treated and how it has impacted our life. And so to say that doesn't exist is really denying like the emotions, like the amygdala of the brain. We emote, we feel things, we experience things, we store memories. And to say that we shouldn't do anything with that part of the brain is so silly. But unfortunately, I think misunderstanding and not enough education around mental health is a problem.
Oh, yes. I'm just like inside, I'm shouting and cheering for what you're saying because this is exactly why I'm doing this because there's not enough out there. And the things you were saying, why there's possibilities of why there's such a stigma is the labels. And that's why I was silent for the longest time. That and the fear of being thrown into a sane asylum. But once I spoke, I did, for the record, start going to counseling this year and right before the COVID-19 situation. And she assured me, you're not crazy. I'm not going to label you crazy. And I'm not putting you into an insane asylum. You're normal. You just need to work through this. And I'm like, yes.
Perfect. So let me ask you, where did you get that perception that you would be put into an insane asylum?
I guess just the way that things are portrayed on TV and the history of it. Like that part of history class I did pay attention to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I've learned that what people don't understand, they reject, and I was a victim of bullying and just I had a good life, but as a child I had leukemia and kids would like pick on me because of that, my hair and all that, and I guess that
Yeah, I didn't know your story, but yeah, and that's really, it's hard, it's brutal. It's like on one hand you're navigating a sickness that other people don't understand, and then it leaves you lonely because of your outward appearance and you can't connect because people are making their judgments. So that's
yes.
really unfortunate. I would hope that during that time there was somebody that you could have connected with, that was a meaningful friendship. But if not, then you've hopefully found some of that in adults. And so that's where it's really sad. And I think it's so important to get the psychoeducation about mental health out there
Mhm.
because people don't understand what they don't understand. And if we had more, information and more resources and they helped educate their children, then I think we would live in a kinder world where that kind of bullying wouldn't hopefully happen.
Yeah.
It'll happen. It's just the nature of our world. I don't know why, but I would hope that there's more kind-hearted people out there to love and accept people no matter who they are and how they live their life or what's going on for them. So, yeah, I'm sorry you experienced that. If I knew you, then we would be friends. I always kind of watched out for the underdog. I don't know. Not that I'm saying you were an underdog, but you know what I mean? Like the people that nobody would hang out with or make all these stories about. I would be the person that would be, I would friend that person, and then I would want to know, like, what are you about? And I never felt peer pressure, like where I wouldn't be friends with somebody. I just talked to everybody, and I'm glad I was like that because it's given me, and I think I continue to be like that. And so I think it's always given me this great ability. I mean, if I put all my friends in one room, you would not think that they were like, they're so different and they come from such different worlds. I mean, my group of friends isn't just like academic people, it's like all kinds. And that's because I want to know and learn about people and their worlds and how they live and function and their thought process. I don't want to be limited to a type or like one group. And when I sat down and I thought about that, I recognized that from very young I was that way. At least until I got a voice, because I was really quiet and introverted. And then probably in middle school, high schoolish, I started to talk more. But I always looked out for those people that, I had different groups of friends and they'd be like, oh, we don't talk to her. And then I'd be like, oh, well, I want to talk to her. I need to figure out who she is. And then I would friend that person. But I just wish that in our world we did a little more of that, because we are more alike than we are different. That's
I love that. I love that. Oh my gosh. I can relate to many things that you said there. I was blessed to grow up with my parents. My dad, we lived paycheck to paycheck.
mm-hmm.
And there was a time where we lived in what they call the projects, an apartment complex that was based on your income. And there was a diversity there, and that's how I grew up around all different type of people, and my parents are, you know, thank god thank god that he chose them for my parents, because they are our first teachers, my first loves, and they taught me the diversity and that it was okay. And I am so thankful for that, because I mean, just the life that I've lived, I've seen hate amongst peers, and I don't understand it. And I'm glad that I don't understand it. Like on the outside, I do the judgment and like better than mentality, and that's just not right. And I'm thankful that I never grew up that way.
Yeah, I think that's a gift because I always say I'm thankful for the parents that I had. So my dad loved history and he went through the U.S. Army, and he was really dark compared to my mom. And then he would tell me that at the time during the civil rights movement, they classified Indian people as Caucasian. And then he
Oh,
he lived in this dichotomy where his army card, it does say Caucasian. I have it. I didn't believe him at first, and he showed me. And then he told me, but yet he was so dark that he was paired up or like grouped with Black people or African American people. And so as growing up, we had like every culture at our table, and we weren't allowed to have like certain we needed to be respectful at all times. And so if there was a discussion that needed to be had, or if I was struggling with something, he would just be like, well, let's look at this or let's understand it. But it didn't matter. Like he was also the person who always had a gift for people who collected our garbage. And
oh,
yeah, he didn't grow up with wealth, but He worked extremely hard, and but he always taught us like that, to have a lot of respect for all walks of life. It doesn't matter whether someone has money or not, because you could have money and in one day your life can change and you could be penniless. So he's like, don't ever look down on people. And so I really had a lot of good wisdom lessons. And I always say I'm so thankful that I had the parents that I had.
Good stuff.
They were pretty strict, but they were really good people. And so I'm thankful for that.
That's good. That makes sense. I can see it. That's awesome. That was really my last big like open-ended question, but I am going to ask one more question, and it is, how do you think we as a community can help those who are suffering with mental illness?
I think we as a community have to get, we have to have different platforms. We definitely have to have the funding. Funding tends to get pulled from mental health right away. If there's any type of pullback in funding in our state or our city level, local level, it always centers around mental health. Elementary school counselors get pulled.
Oh,
It's not mandated, but middle school and high school, and I don't even believe middle school counselors are mandated. High school counselors are. So immediately funding gets pulled. Those are the groups that suffer. Those are the groups that need, elementary students need counseling no matter what, because they have to negotiate so much in life and they need someone to help them guide them through those type of skills. And so then when we also look at things at a state level or a federal level, I'm not so certain about federal, but I do know at the state level funding gets pulled, and there's such a lack of certain services that people don't get what they need. They don't know where to start. We have made a lot of progress where if people have insurance, I know at least in California, we used to have a limit on how many counseling sessions somebody could have, and that limit's been lifted, which has been quite some time now. And then in terms, and I think that's even true with state assisted programs. There's unlimited sessions now. Where there's also a breakdown is maybe how people perceive mental health. People haven't studied it, or they haven't had an experience with it in their own life or within their family. They kind of dismiss it as a profession. I'm not so certain why. It becomes extremely important and valuable when someone is struggling and they have an encounter with a mental health professional or someone who can guide them. And then all of a sudden, the perception changes pretty quickly. So I think a lot of psychoeducation. I also think that mental health is compartmentalized. So if you're extremely ill, like on the spectrum of severe schizophrenia or severe manic type bipolar or depressive type bipolar, you get more services. However, we forget that people, even needing to cope, are also in need of services, that we shouldn't leave people struggling with stress and loss and death, financial stress, school stress, just hanging. And there are some of those services provided at universities, but they usually limit those sessions as well. They don't have ongoing sessions. They'll have like a drop-in counselor. They'll refer them to somewhere they can pay a little bit out of pocket for ongoing care. And hopefully some of that changes, because I think ongoing care is important. Just like we have ongoing care with doctors, we don't just stop going to get blood tests or see our doctor. And things don't just go away. In fact, we have different valleys to try to climb out of at different points of our lives. And it seems like the mental health professionals, they cannot be accessed as readily, and money seems to hinder that too.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's like, I know in California the elderly tend to be a population that really needs mental health services, and their insurance doesn't cover it. There's been a real push to have state level insurance like Medicare start absorbing the cost and mental health needs as well, because they're dealing with illnesses like cancer, heart disease, losses of family members leaving them, and they're trying to cope with their own care. And so they have really strong life struggles, and they don't tend to get those services unless they can afford it. And so I don't know why it's just so difficult to provide services at all levels, which is what I hope we really move towards. There's been an influx of services in many states because of certain types of funding um, that taxpayers agreed to. And so that kind of money has been available for like mobile crisis teams and clinicians, but it's still, we're very far from where we need to be, I think.
That's very interesting. I was reading a little bit about that, being a literal advocate on the NAMI.org. You can sign up for stuff to help literally fight for that, or say that you'll vote this specific way. And I didn't
Yes.
realize that it was so, I'm going to say bad. I didn't realize it was so bad.
Yeah, I feel like I can't speak for other states, but I think in California we're not preventative. We're more like a disaster or crisis needs to happen before we actually start providing what's needed. And that's tends to happen with the elderly too. If adult protective services isn't involved, nobody really checks up on the elderly. Um, and then like our 20 something year olds, I know that more and more universities have those services, but I still think that they're kind of geared around picking classes. Okay, you're struggling to cope, here's a therapist you can go to. If you can't afford it, we don't have ongoing care. And so there were times I saw those 20 something year olds, and I would see them, and then they would lose like their financial aid, or they lost their job. And as a professional, we don't abandon our clients. So we continue to see them, and we make an agreement of what that could look like. And and then also, if there are free clinics, we'll refer them out. But a lot of times I worked for a not-for-profit company at the time. I was an intern, so I was able to continue to see a lot of my clients who couldn't afford counseling. So
Goodness gracious.
yeah, I don't know what it's like where you live, and what the mental health services are like. Like, are there a lot of public agencies that provide mental health services where you live?
I mean, there's a lot of counseling offices and therapist office here, but it comes down to money, a monetary value.
Right.
Unless you're on like state insurance, Medicaid or Medicare or something, it's hard to, I mean, me personally, I had to pay out of my pocket to go speak to my counselor. And that was another holdup too for so long. For real, was the money. It's sad.
Yeah, it is. And it's expensive to see a counselor. Um, I was, I'm, I'm waiting to take my license. It got delayed because of COVID. And so I'm waiting to take that exam. But my goal is, I'm hoping that when I actually have a private practice, that I could have a tier type of service where, sure, I can take people with insurance or private pay, but I hope to do like pro bono work. So take families or clients who can't pay at all, just because I want to be dedicated to the profession. And I still want people who couldn't access mental health to be able to access it. And that's been a lot of my talk on striving within life coaching with see-through's live uh, his live feed is people can reach out to me and I can try to help set them up no matter where they're at, and they're not to worry about trying to pay me. And I didn't want that money keeps people from access or what they need. And sometimes I work with people and they're not able to pay, and I just remind them that that's not what I focus on. I'm able to provide that kind of time at this time where I can take on some people without worrying about the pay.
That is wonderful. That's just a reflection of your heart. I wish I knew more people like that. I know that there's some good people in this world, it's
Yeah,
just hard to come by, and you're
yeah,
one of them.
yeah. I believe they're out there, and I'm sure everybody has different things happening in their life at different times. Like they might have children or families, or they aren't working full time anyways, so they can't squeeze everything in. But I also believe that there are a lot of great people out there who do donate to certain causes or volunteer, who have the mental health backgrounds, and they can do so much more than they know, but maybe they're just not connected and they don't know where to start to provide that kind of support. So I think that's where it could get tricky.
I'm just absorbing and soaking all this in. You're giving out good information, and you're like, I feel you. What you're saying is relating so much to what's inside. I really appreciate your time and your heart. Oh, I appreciate your heart.
Yeah, no problem. That's what
You
I'm
have.
here. I
I
feel like
think.
when we have tools, we're not like we don't get tools to hoard them. We get tools in our life to share them. And if there's something that I know that can be a benefit to somebody else, then I will be the first to share that because I want to see people succeed. I want to see people
Yes.
do well in their life. I want, I mean, health is so significant. Health, mental health, daily needs. Those are really, really important. And I think mental health is a daily need. And so if there's something I can offer to somebody, even if it's a word of encouragement, then I did something with what I've been given. And that's like I'm thankful every day for what I have, and if there's a way I could pass it on and just help somebody else who doesn't know where to start. I mean, that in itself is wonderful. And sometimes just a listening ear. I've been on the end of having really, really bad days. And sometimes it's just that person that's like, hey, are you okay? How are you doing? And it just really changes everything.
Yeah.
And so, we each are so powerful in what we can offer people, if we have like a minute or two. And I think that, yeah, like these are tools, like not for me to hoard and um, I don't know where I'm going to take them. They're like tools for me to disseminate and like give to people if there's a way I can do that. So that's what I live for. So
Thank you so much for being here and sharing your heart. Really, this you're just exposing your heart, and so much of what you said tonight is critical for people to hear. I'm recording this Zoom meeting, and I'm also going to put it on my YouTube as well. Just another level of potential somebody, a nugget. People are looking for these nuggets of wisdom, and I hope and pray that this touches at least one person that needs it. Thank you so much for your time.
you're welcome. Yeah, and I'm always here. So my page is Striving Within Life Coaching. Message me. I will answer you. I will try to provide a resource if I can, even like a quick conversation if that's what somebody needs. So I'm here as well, and I live for this work. So if somebody needs something, I try to figure out how to get that, or I try to connect them so they can get it.
That's wonderful. If I come across somebody that's struggling, I definitely know where to send them.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you again. I'm going to end it here and I'll be in touch. I appreciate this.
Yes, sure. And thank you for having me.
My pleasure. We'll have to do this again.
Yeah, definitely. Whenever, just let me know.
All righty. Well, thank you. I hope you have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.